The LA Kings are in the thick of a battle for first place in the Pacific Division. Eddie Garcia of Locked On Kings join us to talk about the fight for first place and where the Kings stand as we head into the playoffs. All that and more coming up on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are free and available on all platforms. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On LA Kings, Eddie Garcia. And Eddie, last night's game notwithstanding, the Kings are playing some good hockey lately.
They really are. And, since the turn of the calendar, things have certainly been improving, and the Kings really helped themselves out at the trade deadline, shoring up the two areas of need they needed to shore up the most in goaltending and defense. And ever since the trade deadline, they've been one of the best teams in the NHL, have done a great job defensively and in goaltending. The Kings, look like they're trending in the right direction at the right time of the year, which is encouraging for Kings fans.
Let's talk about that goaltending because Joonas Korpisalo has really been shining. 3-0-1, a goals against average just under 2. How has he reacted to this trade, and what has he meant to the Kings since coming over?
He's fit in very well. It certainly appears that he is obviously now in a situation where he's going to be playing in meaningful games. Which is, I think every player, he had played his entire career in Columbus. So there's always kind of a shock when you leave a team for the first time. But I think he's very excited to be on a team where he's going to get some action and he's going to play in meaningful games. And it's been a very smooth transition. I suppose, when it's a goaltender, they kind of do their thing. It's not like, incorporating a forward into your second line or something along those lines, which maybe would take a little bit more time as far as like a transition. But he's stepped in very well. He's in a platoon situation with Phoenix Copley that actually alternated starts every game since the deadline, and they're both playing extremely well. They both have the same record, 3-0-1, and Copley's goals against average is actually better, and save percentage is actually better than Korpisalo, and Korpisalo's been good. So there's a very healthy competition going on right now in net. It's a great problem to have at this point. I have no idea who they would turn to if the playoffs started today. And there's a lot of discussion going on with that, obviously, amongst Kings fans. But it's a 1A, 1B right now, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad problem to have. And I think both guys may be a friendly competition to push themselves a bit as well. But Joonas Korpisalo has come in and really solidified things for sure. When you're in a tight race where every point counts and you're trying to win a division, which the Kings have done once in their existence, you like to get that home ice advantage. The Kings have been a very good home team this year. Then it's great to have another goaltender who you feel confident in that you could win every night. And frankly, that wasn't the case with Jonathan Quick while he was here. He's obviously gone on and turned things around a little bit in Vegas, but no, Joonas Korpisalo has come in, fit in very well, and the goaltending, which going into the season was a question mark, and then in the middle of the season was also a little bit of a question mark, has now been solidified.
If the season ended now, do you have a preference as to who you would have in between the pipes for game one?
If I had to pick, I think I would go Korpisalo. Phoenix Copley's been a tremendous story for the Kings this year, and in a lot of ways, you could argue he's been their MVP because, when they were having a lot of issues in net with their two goalies, if people don't recall, Cal Peterson and Jonathan Quick was the tandem to start the year. Peterson got put on waivers and now is in the AHL, and Quick obviously has been traded. So he came out of nowhere. Again, really, his numbers weren't great, but he was one of those guys. He just battles in net every game and he gives you a shot every night. And that's really what he's done. I think one game, honestly, he had a bad game. And every other game, he's allowing about 2 goals a game. And that gives you a shot to win every night if you're a halfway decent team. That said, He has no playoff experience. And if anybody remembers what Joonas Korpisalo did a few years back in Columbus when they beat the Leafs in the first round, and then he had that insane 83 save performance against the Lightning in a 5 overtime game. I think he's shown when he's locked in, he can get it done at those types of moments. So if I had to pick today, I think I would lean towards Joonas Korpisalo. But I think Phoenix Copley is a very solid option if things don't work out, to go to your number 2 guy.
Kevin Fiala leading the team in scoring, but out right now, day to day. How important is it to get him back? And do you have any news about when he may return to the lineup?
Yeah, it's extremely important to get him back. The Kings are a much better offensive team than they were a year ago. But that said, as you said, he's their leading scorer. He was their big offseason acquisition to make the offense better. He's helped out on the number 1 power play unit. He's played on the 3rd line, actually, which might surprise some people, but he's been very effective in that role. He's been up and down the lineup. They started him off on the top line. He played on the 2nd line when there was an injury to Trevor Moore, but he's been more comfortable and more productive on that 3rd line. And it obviously makes the Kings that much more of a deeper team, a team that's difficult to contend with when you're an opposing coach and you send your 3rd line over the boards against their leading scorer. But he's very important because he's the one guy on this team that can make instant offense by himself. There's a lot of skilled guys on the Kings, but he's the one who can go end to end at any point. So I've seen, the last few games, the Kings offense has not been quite as productive as it has been. In particular, the game on Saturday against Vancouver, they could have really used a guy who could turn it on and get things kind of going in the right direction. So they say he's day to day. That's always a little bit iffy when it comes to the NHL. But everything we're hearing is that he should get back on the ice and start skating this week. For people who don't know, he was injured in a knee-on-knee collision a few games back against Colorado. Those are always extremely scary. He did come back for 1 shift in that game and then left afterwards. So it seemed like that was a little bit of good news that he at least felt like he could go back out and test it, but something didn't feel right. And but again, what we're hearing is this week he'll get back on the ice. I'm sure it'll be another week before they even think about getting him into a game if that timeline kind of holds up. So the encouraging thing is it appears he will be back for the playoffs.
Obviously, we're less than a month away from the end of the regular season. We're in the stretch drive now. Is there a team that the Kings want to avoid in the first round of the playoffs, since there's only a few possible teams they could face at this point?
Yeah, I don't know that there is. I guess, and who knows how it could work out, but the Vegas situation with Jonathan Quick is a very unusual one. Kings fans, and I'm sure some of the guys in the locker room, I don't know that they want to face Jonathan Quick, frankly. Not because they fear him necessarily, but just because, Drew Doughty was on After Hours on Hockey Night in Canada last night, and he talked about there's one game coming up between the Kings and Vegas. It's in Las Vegas. And they asked him about, facing his old teammate, and it was pretty clear that he wasn't looking forward to it. And it was not something he really wanted to even think about. So and I know a lot of Kings fans would be very torn if Jonathan Quick was the number 1 goalie for our, one of our hated rivals in the playoffs. It would be very, very weird. But we'll see how it works. And who knows if Jonathan Quick will even be the number 1 goalie when the playoffs come around for Vegas. Obviously, they've got some injury issues, but I would think just from that standpoint, not really an on-ice standpoint, but just that dynamic, I think a lot of Kings fans would have very mixed emotions if the Kings had to face Vegas in a playoff series and Jonathan Quick was in net. Other than that, honestly, I know that, Connor McDavid is playing out of his mind. But the Kings played him last year and we went 7 games with them. And I think the Kings are a better team all around than they were last year. And I think a lot of Kings fans would like to get a little payback on Edmonton from last year. So I kind of think that's going to be the first round matchup, but we'll see. But I don't know that there's any fear of anyone in the Western Conference.
Fair enough. Eddie, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Obviously, it's Locked On LA Kings on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, as we like to say. We're on Twitter at Locked On LA Kings. And personally, I'm at Eddie on Fox on Twitter. So yeah, they should be. It's been a great experience for me taking over the show this season. It's been a fun season, and really have enjoyed it. So if any Kings fans are out there that want to get on board once the playoffs, are getting going here, that would be great.
All right, Eddie, thanks so much for joining us. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure, Gil. Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you've got to try a Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And listen to some of these amazing flavors like peanut butter brownie, churro, coconut almond, or my personal favorite, cookies and cream. And look, the macros are outstanding. Each bar averages just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but they pack a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now, you could still go to built.com to get these protein bars delivered directly to your home. Or if you want to get a box right away, just head to your local Walmart or Sam's Club, and you can pick them up immediately in person. So it's Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, available at built.com or at Walmart and Sam's Club. You can thank me later.